bent double like old beggars under sacks, knock-kneed, coughing like hags we cursed through sludge, till on the haunting flares we turned our backs, and towards our distant rest began to trudge. Men marched asleep, many had lost their boots, but limped on, bloodshod. All went lame, all blind, drunk with fatigue, deaf even to the hoots of tired, outstripped 5-9s that dropped behind. Gas, gas, quick boys, an ecstasy of fumbling, fitting the clumsy helmets just in time. But someone still was yelling out and stumbling, and floundering like a man in fire or lime, dim through the misty panes and thick green light, as under eye green sea I saw him drowning. In all my dreams, before my helpless sight, he plunges at me, guttering, choking, drowning. If in some smothering dreams you too could pace behind the wagon that we flung him in, and watch the white eyes writhing in his face, his hanging face, like a devil's sick of sin. If you could hear at every jolt the blood come gargling from the froth-corrupted lungs, obscene as cancer, bitter as the cud, of vile, incurable sores on innocent tongues, my friend, you would not tell with such high zest to children ardent for some desperate glory, the old lie, dulce and decorum es, pro patria more.
Over 100 years ago, 21-year-old Wilfred Owen joined the British forces. From 1915, he took part in heavy fighting in France. "I have not been at the front," he wrote to his mother. "I have been in front of it." After being diagnosed with shell shock in 1917, Owen was sent to convalesce at a hospital in Scotland. He soon began writing about his experiences, and by 1918 he had produced several now famous works, including Anthem for Doomed Youth, Strange Meeting, and the one we have just heard, Dulce et Decorum Est, which describes a gas attack in grim detail. Owen returned to the front line in August 1918 and was later killed while leading men across the canal in France. His mother received notice of his death on November the 11th, the same date the Great War finally came to an end. In 1919, both the French and British planned victory parades in their capital cities. For London, a temporary monument was erected in Whitehall. This was so popular that in 1920 it was rebuilt to what we know today as the Cenotaph. Over the next 20 years, memorials were erected all over the country in remembrance to the Great War fallen. The Bay was no different, with both Shanklin and Lake memorials opening in 1920, and here at Sandown 1 year later. In this film, we will look at the history of the memorial, Sandown churches, and those from the area awarded the Victoria Cross, with the help from Year 6 pupils at the Bay Church of England School in Sandown.
Remembrance Day is a very important day of the year to many people because warriors and soldiers risked their life and sacrificed themselves for us. So that is why on Thursday on the 11th of November we celebrate Remembrance Day to pay respect. How to pay respect on Remembrance Day? There are loads of different ways that people pay respect on Remembrance Day. Here are a few of them. Stand in silence for 3 minutes or buy flowers and put them at the warrior's grave or at the memorial.
People meet at this war memorial to remember the people who fought for us in the First World War. People lay poppy wreaths on Remembrance Day around this war memorial to remember them. The war memorial was built on the 25th of July 1921.
The Sandown War Memorial was unveiled and dedicated on the 25th of July 1921 by the then Governor of the Isle of Wight, Her Royal Highness Princess Beatrix. It was a Grade II listed First World War memorial to commemorate the 78 servicemen of the town who gave their lives in the conflict. It was designed by local architect Percy Stone. Stone became the island's historian, with a particular interest in Carisbrooke Castle, on which he undertook restorations under the patronage of Princess Beatrix. In 1904, he rebuilt the chapel of St Nicholas, which was dedicated as a memorial to Charles I. Stone designed a number of war memorials on the island, including those at Arrowton, Bembridge, Brading, Freshwater, Whippingham and Whitwell, now all listed as Grade II monuments. Sandown Memorial was constructed from Portland stone by Mr. C. Travail of Truro at a cost of around £560. The stones forming the base formerly served as gun mountings at the nearby Yaverland Battery. The panel faces northwestwards, towards the esplanade, and bears the inscription, "Remember the love for them who came not home from the war." This is taken from Robert Bridges' Eton Memorial Ode, in memory of the old Etonians whose lives were lost in the South African War, and later music was added in 1916 by Sir Hubert Parry. The tall cross stands on a curved plinth, which in turn stands on a two-stepped base, and on the wheel of the cross includes "Each gave a life for you and me." The final line from At the Dawn from the Ballads of Battle by Private Joseph Lee. Lee was part of a remarkable band of 9 journalists from the city of Dundee, who enlisted with the 4th Territorial Battalion of the Black Watch. They were dubbed the Fighter Writers and immediately plunged into action after being sent to France in 1915. All but one returned home. On the border beneath the panel have been inserted the dates 1914 to 1918 and 1939 to 1945. The names of those lost in the First World War are inscribed on the other sides of the plinth, and a granite plaque with those of the Second World War was added to the face at the top step. It was on the 25th of July 2021 that the Sandown Memorial turned 100 years old. His Royal Highness Prince Michael of Kent visited the site to commemorate the centenary, as well as the island's Lord Lieutenant Susie Sheldon and the High Sheriff James Attrell. Other guests joining the celebrations included members of the Sandown and Shanklin Independent Lifeboat, descendants of service personnel named on the memorial, the head of the Bay Church of England Primary School and pupils with governors, Reverend Williams and Reverend Hall, who presented Prince Michael with a set of mugs especially designed by pupils from the school. One of those who attended the 100th anniversary was Sandown-born Bill Wyke. On the memorial is Bill's father, William Charles Wyke. On the 9th of April 1943, HMS Beverley was on a convoy escort off the coast of Iceland. During this convoy, she was seriously damaged in collision with a British steam merchant, Cairn Valona, so she took station at the rear of the convoy. 2 days later, on the 11th of April 1943, the German submarine U-188 fired a series of torpedoes at the convoy. HMS Beverley was hit and sunk. There were only 2 survivors out of a crew of 155. William was the son of Enoch and Edith Ellen Wyke and was married to Bessie Amy. Their son Bill was just 1 year old when his father was killed.
He was a Royal Navy sailor. He joined the Navy, I think, in about 1933. He was due, actually, to come out of the Navy in 1939, but because of the war and the fact that they needed people who knew what they were doing, should we say, he didn't need training but could train other people. He remained on duty, but unfortunately, he was protecting convoys, bringing stuff from America and Russia, etc., etc. and his ship was torpedoed. He was on a frigate, Swan it was called. And it went down, and there was only 2 survivors from the whole company. 2 of them lived at Petersfield, and when he was killed, I mean, the chap who was actually one of the survivors was the man who sponsored me at my christening, and you've got a certificate over there with his name on the back. I didn't know him very well. I only have got pictures of him holding me because I was only about 3 or 4 months old then when he went back to sea. But I don't remember him very well. The only thing I do, which I think is a very, very poignant part, is the last time he went home, went back to sea, there was a lady lived next door to us called Cox, Grand Cox we always used to call her. And he gave her his Seaman's Bible. And he said, "Well, you make sure my son gets this because I'm not coming back." Now that to me was very poignant when she told me, because he must have had some, I don't know, they do say people knew when they weren't coming back. But, you know, he was a Sandown chap.
Another veteran on the memorial from the First World War was Richard Harold Leslie Punch, remembered by his family member Richard Wood, who is part of the Sandown and Shanklin military band.
My great-granduncle, so basically my great-grandfather's youngest brother, he was the second youngest of a family of 13 children. They lived in Avenue Road in Sandown, number 112, a house that I'm familiar with, as many of his sisters lived there when I was a child, so I obviously knew 3 of those. He was born in 1898, and he joined the 1st and 8th Hampshire Regiment, we think sometime around his 18th birthday, but it may have been before. And obviously wanted to join all his brothers in the army who were already there, and he went to Egypt, basically. And unfortunately, at the age of 18, he died in the Second Battle of Gaza. So he's actually buried in the Alexandra Hadra War cemetery. He is mentioned on the grave of my great-grandparents at Christchurch next door. And basically he's one of the listed people on the War Memorial.
8 years before the Sandown Memorial was unveiled, Eric Charles Twelves Wilson was born. It was during the Battle of Tug Argan in British Somaliland, now known as Somalia, that Acting Captain Lieutenant Wilson of the East Surrey Regiment was awarded the Victoria Cross. 2 members from Year 6 researched his life.
He was born at Sandown, Isle of Wight on the 2nd of October 1912, and he was educated at Marlborough at Sandhurst. In addition to that, he was commissioned into the East Surrey Regiment on the 2nd of February 1933. Believe it or not, but he was also second to the King's African Rifles in 1931.
Eric Charles Twelves is famous for getting the Victoria Cross, which is to fight the highest enemy. He was born on the 2nd of October 1912 on the Isle of Wight. He joined the army in 1933. He served in the Western Desert with a long group in Burma. Did you know that he was second on the King's side? When he was fighting, he got injured but still carried on. He got shot in his right shoulder and also got shot in the left eye. He only stopped when both of his guns got blown to pieces. He died on the 23rd of December 2008. His death place was in Milbourne Port.
Speaking to the Imperial War Museum, Colonel Wilson remembers the final battle before becoming a prisoner of war.
Our position was based on 4 hills. Quite the outstanding and most important one was Observation Hill. They all looked down about a mile to a tug. Our tug is a dry river bed, and the Italians were forming up, hidden, protected in this tug bed. Fairly soon after sunrise we got our first target, perhaps rather unwisely. We were rather pleased, we obviously found something to hit. But of course once you start opening fire with the machine guns, you draw attention to the enemy artillery, which we did in a big way. And we got a number of 2 or 3 anyway, direct hits into the embrasure. But eventually, with another chap, I got down from the hill, and we spent the night in the open. But the next day we were picked up, and so I was a prisoner of war then. Well, after about 4 months, perhaps, in the prison camp, an airman who had been shot down came in, and he said he'd read in the paper that I had a Victoria Cross. Well, I don't remember making any impact on me at all. I don't know whether I believed it or what. And that I was at the entrance to the camp, and before he got down from the car, he called out, "Who's the man with the Victoria Cross?" So I said, "Well, I believe I am." Well, later I discovered that this has been posthumous. I'm not quite sure why, but I was very unhappy about having the VC at that stage.
It was in the London Gazette on the 11th of October 1940 that Wilson's fighting to the last was reported that he had been killed in action. Along with the report was a message from Buckingham Palace. The King had been pleased to approve the award of the Victoria Cross to Lieutenant Acting Captain Eric Charles Twells Wilson from the East Surrey Regiment, attached to the Somaliland Camel Corps. But this was incorrect, as he'd been captured and was now a prisoner of war. After returning home, Eric Wilson lived a full life before passing away in Stowell, Somerset, on December the 23rd, 2008, at the age of 96. Another connection to Sandown and the Victoria Cross comes from Harry Frederick Whitchurch.
Harry Frederick Whitchurch was born on the 2nd of September 1866 and died at the age of 40 on the 16th of August 1907. Whitchurch was only 28 years old when he was a surgeon captain in the Indian Medical Service. The only award Harry Frederick Whitchurch achieved was the Victoria Cross, which is the highest and most prestigious award for gallantry that can be awarded to the British and Commonwealth forces. When Harry Frederick Whitchurch died, he was buried in the Dhurmsala churchyard.
Whitchurch was 28 years old and a surgeon captain in the Indian Medical Service during the Chitral expedition of 1895. At the commencement of the siege on the 3rd of March, Surgeon Captain Whitchurch went to the assistance of Captain Baird of the 24th Bengal Infantry, who was mortally wounded, and brought him back to the fort under heavy fire from the enemy. After returning home, Harry Frederick Whitchurch was given the rank of Surgeon Major and was invested with his Victoria Cross by Queen Victoria at Osborne House on the 27th of July 1895. Harry continued his love with both the Isle of Wight and India. One place Harry felt at home was the newly formed Conservative Club in Sandown, and on his return he was made an honorary member for life. Sadly, that life was to be short. While visiting India, he caught enteric fever. He passed aged just 40 years old in 1907 and is buried in the Dharamsala churchyard in India. As the memorial reminds us, many members from Sandown have lost their lives during the wars. Even on the island, the Sandown played its part, especially during World War II. One of the Year 6 pupils, as part of his research, looked into one of these, PLUTO.
PLUTO stands for Pipeline Under the Ocean and was an engineering project during the Second World War, designed by engineers, the British Army and oil companies. PLUTO was pipelines under the sea used to carry fuel from Sandown, Isle of Wight. The fuel was for the armed forces in France. PLUTO pipelines were constructed at night in total secrecy. PLUTO pipelines and pumps were hidden in Brown's Golf Course, Pavilion, and the Brown's ice cream factory. There were a total of 14 pumps.
Sandown has 8 churches from different denominations. The oldest of these is St. John's the Baptist in Yaverland. Yaverland was virtually isolated on a spit of land under Bembridge Down. Cut off from the parish church by the tidal Brading Haven, the De Orla family of Yaverland Manor built a chapel of ease with fine Norman features. The male line at Yaverland died out in the reign of Edward I. Eleanor, daughter and heiress of Sir Thomas de Orla, married William Russell, who built the causeway connecting the overland with Brading. It was during the reign of Henry VIII, Yaverland was assigned as a garrison church, initially for the troops at Sandown Castle, built in the 1540s, and so continued until 1945. The church retains a columned Norman doorway with a strange pattern of small intersecting circles. But the present appearance of the building is Victorian, as a result of Ewan Christian's restoration of 1887. He added the timber bellcot and porch, built aisles and a vestry, extended the chancel and reordered the interior. Much of the stained glass is also of this era. Today, the church is still an important part of the community. At the other end of Sandown, you will find Christ Church, which is located on the Broadway.
Christ Church was built in 1845 by the architect Woodman. As an addition to this, it was the first Church of England building in Sandown, so it is considered the parish church of the town. This memorial within the Christ Church commemorates the members of the parish who were killed or went missing in the First World War. The inscription on the memorial starts with, "To the glory of God in affectionate memory." The graveyard also contains war graves of 19 personnel who lost their lives in World War I and II. A French officer from World War I is also buried there.
The church was consecrated in 1847 by Charles Summer, Bishop of Winchester, and the father-in-law of Mary Summer, who was the founder of the Mothers' Union. Reverend Thomas was put in charge of the new church when the parish of Sandown was formed in 1856. He became the first vicar and remained in place till 1862. It was also in 1862 the clock in the tower was given by Mrs. Smythe, in memory of her husband, Major Smythe. In 1863 the north aisle was added, producing the well-proportioned plan of a nave and 2 aisles as seen today. The building is an example of Victorian Gothic, echoing the most part of an early English style. An unusual feature of the church is that it is not constructed in the normal east-west axis, with the Holy Table, which would normally be found at the east end of the church, but found towards the north. The 1870s was a time of significant activity and expansion. A gallery at the west end was removed and a fine doorway erected in memory of Sir Henry Oglander. The organ, which had been in the gallery, was replaced by a new one built by Foster and Andrews and sited next to where the choir would have been in the chancel. Also in 1874, the east wall, which was originally where the present chancel steps are, was set back and the chancel, the vestry and the Princess Royal Chapel came into being. The chapel is so named because a window in it was given by Princess Victoria and her husband. The original font at Christ Church was transferred to St John's. Today's current font was given in 1879 in memory of Elizabeth Harvard Wragg by her parents. There are many beautiful stained glass windows in the church made by Clayton and Bell of Frampton. The extensive churchyard is now closed and under the maintenance of the Isle of Wight Council. One grave contains the remains of 7 members of HMS Eurydice, a training ship that sank in Sandown Bay on Sunday the 24th of March 1878, with the loss of 483 lives. The churchyard also contains 21 graves maintained by the Commonwealth War Graves Commission. Since the church was founded, there have been 18 incumbents, the shortest being 2 years and the longest 29. The church patrons of the Church Patronage Trust are also the patrons of St Paul's, Shanklin. Christ Church became officially linked with St Paul's when the current priest in charge, the Reverend Mark Williams, was appointed on the 20th of August 2017. Over 120 years ago, an iron church stood on the site of the current St John's Evangelist Church, overlooking a much smaller town than Sandown is today. The church was erected when Christ Church proved too small. Eventually, the iron church was not big enough, and on the initiative of the vicar at the time, the Reverend Gilbert Spanshot Carney, work was started on a new stone church on the same site. The iron church structure was dismantled and sent to Devon, where it was re-erected in Teignmouth. It was on the 26th of September 1878 that Lady Oglander was to lay the foundation stone for the new building. The church was built in Portland stone and able to seat 700 people. Reverend Carney left the parish in 1881 before the work of the new church was completed. The first service took place on Thursday the 2nd of June 1881 and saw for the first time a large congregation worshipping in the parish church. Reverend Carney, making a special visit, was the preacher, even though the service was opened by the new vicar, Reverend William Townsend Stalls. St John's is built in the early English style with stone from nearby St Boniface quarries and roofed with tiles. The 112 feet long by 30 feet wide church was without a conventional spire, but the 60-foot high roof was topped by a turret terminating in a finial 100 feet from the ground. Nearly 127 years on, in spite of several additions and extensions, the church has retained its essential simplicity and charm. It has a wide brick interior, a short chancel and narrow aisles. The windows were described by the poet John Betjeman as a rarity and colouring quite magnificent, these all depicting scenes from the life of Christ. The 3 larger lights show the Holy Family, the Crucifixion and the Resurrection. The central window is dedicated in memory of Hilda, daughter of the Reverend Canon Whitby, who was the vicar between 1891 and 1905, and depicts Mary and Martha at Bethany with a central figure of Christ in the robe of vibrant red. The window to the left is a memorial to a young 21-year-old soldier who died while serving in the 3rd phase of the Second Boer War in Transvaal in 1901. The Lady Chapel screen serves as a memorial to those who died in the Great War. The Father Willis organ, built in Winchester, was first installed in 1883 and was moved from the north side of the chancel to its present post in 1966, when the west porch was built. The church annex was opened in 1966, which added rooms and a kitchen to the church facilities. Nowadays, this is used by a number of organisations for a host of activities. In February 2004, the Beverley Community Hall was opened, giving additional space for use by St John's and other organisations. Apart from the 3 Anglican churches in Sandown, there are 5 other denominations. St Patrick's Roman Catholic Church is part of the South Wyke Roman Catholic Parish, which includes the Sacred Heart in Shanklin and Our Lady and St Wilfred's in Ventnor. St Patrick was built in 1928 and is based on the design of Honan Chapel, formerly St Finbarr's Collegiate Chapel in Cork, Ireland, and is designed in a Hiberno-Romanesque revival style. Another denomination can be found in York Road. Sandown Methodist Church was built in 1882 and has seating for 200 people, with a further 75 in the gallery. The building has undergone several changes over the years. The most recent has been alterations to the interior to enable it to be a much more flexible space for worship on a Sunday and other events that take place during the week. In Avenue Road you will find the Avenue Road Evangelical Chapel. This church was built in the 1860s for Wesleyan Methodists, with 2 services on a Sunday using the New King James Bible. It was on Sunday the 7th of August 1881, under the leadership of the Reverend Alfred Bird, a group of Baptist believers met in a room over a mineral water factory in Bridge Street, now St John's Road. Within a few weeks, the number had grown so quickly that they were forced to look for larger premises. Reverend Charles Haddon Spurgeon, founder of Spurgeon's College, suggested that, in an act of faith, a building fund should be set up. He sent a cheque together with donations for a number of his supporters. So, on Thursday the 9th of February, 1882, the covenant was read and entered into during an inauguration service conducted by Reverend Spurgeon, and Sandown Baptist Church came into being. A month later, Reverend Spurgeon came to cut the first sod on the site of the present church. In May 1882, the foundation stones of the new building were laid, and on Thursday the 20th of July that same year, Sandown Baptist Church was opened for public worship. The original structure has remained unchanged for over 100 years, until it became necessary to replace the front entrance in 1987. The traditional wooden pews were removed during the early part of 2005, when the sanctuary underwent a refurbishment program, in order to make the building better suited for its purpose. During the years since 1881, membership and congregations have often fluctuated. And throughout this period, 20 pastors have led the church. The newest church in Sandown can be found in Fort Street, the Lighthouse Church. This church originates as a Bethel Pentecostal church that was founded in 1946. Mrs. Dimmer, along with a small group of people, believed the time was right to begin a new expression of the life of Jesus in Sandown, Bethel, meaning House of El or House of God. Bethel is believed to be a village found on the West Bank near Jerusalem, which was first mentioned in the book of Genesis as the place near to where Abraham pitched his tent. On January the 1st, 2018, the Lighthouse Church was founded by Drew and Kerry Jenks, following a transition from being appointed by the incumbent Bethel Church and anointed by God, with Drew being the senior pastor and Kerry the associate pastor. Drew and Kerry have known each other since they were teenagers, where they met at a church youth group. Following 26 years of friendship and paths that took them on different journeys, they eventually married in 2012 and became a blended family. As the next 100 years starts, we must never forget those who have fallen, suffered life-changing injuries, or been affected mentally, no matter what conflicts have happened, both in the past and for the future, in protecting our lives, country and shores from adversity. The Sandown Memorial has stood proud for 100 years as a reminder to this, as she stands tall and proud, keeping a watch over Sandown and the bay.